Welcome to the Toxics Reduction via Responsible E-Waste Management video series, presented to you by the Delta Institute with funding from the US EPA Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. In this video, Margaret Renas, project manager with the Delta Institute, brings us the presentation, Why Recycle E-Waste, Part 2. This content was originally created for a workshop series in Toledo and Cleveland, Ohio.
So we know what these substances that are in electronics and why they're concerning, but how do they get out of electronics and get into our environment? And this can happen through a number of ways, and these are pretty common and typical in our society. Some are managed and some are mismanaged. We've got a few listed here, and we're going to go over each of these. Recycling, improper recycling, we'll talk about a little bit. And we've also got some additional videos from our recyclers that talk about proper recycling. So keeping harmful materials out of the environment, open dumping, it's illegal, and unfortunately it's still persistent in our society. As much as our solid waste agencies stay on top of this, it's unregulated and it's difficult to manage. As you can see in this photo, it can crop up anywhere just about, inside of buildings in urban areas and in forest preserves, just about anywhere. And you can see here an example of, if you can imagine if some computers were tossed on this pile and they were broken. We know CRTs, those big old computer screens we're used to having, contain lead. And if that glass is broken, that lead can make it into the soil and into the groundwater. Again, another example, mercury lamps from LCDs. Again, if those are broken, they can easily move into the environment, as is depicted in this photograph. Disposal in landfills. So this is a managed form of how we manage our waste, municipal waste as well as electronic waste. And landfills are designed to protect human health. There are US EPA regulations as of the early 90s to make sure of that. And what those regulations mean is there are liners at the bottom of those landfills to keep contaminants from entering the soil and the groundwater. There are those leachate collection systems that collect that percolated water that can contain contaminants, and it captures that and treats it, and we have monitoring wells. So these are designed to protect human health. But we also know some other facts as well. Like any man-made system, there are always flaws. And just to kind of run through the logic of this, about 70% of the heavy metals that are currently being identified in U.S. landfills are from electronics, even though e-scrap only accounts for 2% of that waste by volume. So what we know is that in landfills, we're seeing a much higher level of heavy metals than we've ever seen in the past. And municipal landfills, where business and residential waste goes, are not designed really to handle that level of heavy metals. Leachate will contain an increasing concentration of those soluble heavy metals as electronics disposal increases. So again, as we have all those electronics that are going to be liberated from warehouses, from people's basements, and go into the landfills, those heavy metal concentrations are going to do nothing but increase. And leachate, we know there are collection systems put in place to make sure that it's captured and treated and doesn't harm the environment. But it can seep into soil and groundwater. Even in a well-designed landfill, there are some statistics that about a gallon per acre per day can leak into the surrounding area. And also we know that liners, they do develop holes at times. Seams can split. Leachate collection systems, the pipes can get crushed by the weight of the electronics overhead. And leachate collection systems can fail. So heavy metals can get into the soil and groundwater that way. Another source of another pathway, mercury has been tested and found to be present in landfill gas. And now the amount of mercury that they're testing and finding is very small in comparison to other industrial sources, as is the heavy metal that's in leachate. But we do know that it can move into the environment in these ways, and there are different forms of mercury that have not been addressed in some of these studies, and if mercury is being released in those forms, that can eventually bioaccumulate into fish. And lastly, there are 30-year closure plans once a landfill is closed. But what happens after 30 years? We know that heavy metals move very slowly through organic waste. And so landfills have only been around for about 60 years, and these highly regulated ones only for the last 20 years. We don't have a lot of research on what's going to happen to landfills after closure plans are finished and everybody's left and no one's monitoring it anymore. And so there has been some conjecture and speculation that some of these heavy metals may be moving out of these landfills in years to come. So what is the takeaway from all of this in terms of landfills? And that's that landfills are safe, but there's enough reason for caution, particularly when better alternatives like recycling exist. So we're certainly not at any kind of DEFCON 5 when we talk about the risk of putting electronics into landfills. But, you know, we can say we're maybe at DEFCON 2 or 2.5, and we want to take a step back and we want to look at what we're doing and make sure that we're not creating environmental hazards for future generations. Another reason to keep recycled or to keep electronics out of the environment, or rather another pathway of how they get into the environment, recycling. We have mismanaged recycling. So mismanaged recycling is when it's not done correctly, and that can happen in the U.S. or it can happen globally. In the U.S., we have health and safety measures that we should be following in a lot of recycling plants, and sometimes that's not always the case. If a CRT glass is broken, that lead can adhere to glass particulates that get into the air and can be breathed in. Again, those mercury lamps, if those are broken, that can create an exposure as well. So this is why it's very important that, especially for businesses, we want to use a certified recycler. And this is addressed in another of our videos and in one of our fact sheets that we may want to look at. And beyond the U.S., we know that many of our e-scrap is being exported to developing countries. So this is a number that it's hard to get a grasp on. And we do have a statistic up here from Greenpeace. And, you know, Greenpeace tends to elicit strong emotional responses from people. And but we do have a number that they've tossed up here. As much as 50 to 80% of recycled e-scrap is shipped to developing nations. And the GAO also acknowledges, while they don't know that number, they know a large amount is going to developing countries like China and India. And what that means, so we have here's a typical example in this photograph of a worker in China. And they don't have the safeguards in place that we have here in this country, and they're also not efficient at how they're managing and breaking down these electronics. So, you know, here's an example of open dumping where all these electronics were dumped and someone without any kind of health and safety precautions disassembling some electronics. And what that can do is it has been shown to create floating clouds of dust, invisible clouds of dust about a meter off the ground. And here from the China Daily was an alarming study that was published not very long ago. One test of a town in China revealed that 88%, almost 90% of the 167 children, and these children are under 6 years of age, were tested and found to have lead poisoning, which is a frightening prospect. So here we have a situation where the greatest, maybe most developed country on the planet is unfortunately shipping its waste to countries that are the least equipped to handle it. And here's a real positive reason for recycling. We'll end this little talk on a positive note. Recycling electronics creates jobs. And these jobs can be somewhat partially semi-skilled jobs, paying, you know, higher salaries than unskilled labor. And this can really help families to support themselves. So instead of that waste going straight into the garbage, we can turn that into jobs and economic opportunities, which, as we're still trying to recover from this recession, is something even more important than in times past. And I just want to read this one statistic here. We've got two up here, one for Ohio and another from a sister state in the Great Lakes region, that in 2010, is estimated that nearly 8,000 jobs were created from electronics recycling alone. That's pretty amazing. So, just to recap, here again are the reasons for recycling electronics. Reduces use of energy and production resources, conserves natural resources, keeps that e-waste out of landfill space and keeps that diminishing space for when we really need it, keeps some harmful materials out of the environment, and if that's not great enough, it creates some jobs. So I guess the question really becomes not why would you recycle electronics, but why wouldn't you recycle electronics?